Hi, good morning, everybody. And thank you again for spending an hour with us today. We are really excited to have Rachel Jenkins of Scrap My Pics back with us for a second edition of Organizing Photos. She was here a couple of months ago, and I think many of you attended that webinar. And we talked about organizing our photos and creating a legacy. And that was really our prints that we have in scrapbooks and albums and things like that. And then as we finished that webinar, it dawned on me that, the majority of us now, everything's digital. And if you're like me, you have digital photos on your laptop, on your phone, probably on a thumb drive, maybe on, a CD somewhere. You might have them on another hard drive from an old computer. And also stored in space and all these different places you can store your photos. So we reached out to Rachel, and she's going to talk to us today about digital photo organizing. But before we get started with that, just a couple of things. As always, we are recording this webinar, so you will be able to watch it again on our YouTube channel. And Adrian will be sending you a link in a day or two, so watch for that email. And you can also see all of our previous webinars on our YouTube channel, including the first one that Rachel did with us in the spring. So please feel free to go there and take a peek at those. We've spent the last year doing all virtual events, everything, a lot of different topics in our webinars that have been very well received, but we are getting very close to reopening and bringing people in again for live in-person events. So I wanted to just, we're going to continue doing webinars. We have actually a 4-part series coming up in August and September about long-term care planning and Medicaid and Medicare. So that will be probably our last one for a bit. And then we're going to transition in August, in addition to the webinars that we're going to be hosting. We're going to be doing some small tours again and small in-person events. So you'll be getting some invitations soon to come to those, and I hope that you will make some time to come. I would love to see you in person and not just behind the camera, but I hope you'll look for those and join us. So please help me welcome Rachel Jenkins. Rachel's going to come on here, and she's going to have her presentation, which includes a little bit of an introduction about herself and her business. So good morning, Rachel. Thanks again for spending time with us. I know you got valuable time with us, so I really appreciate that. And yeah, well, this is a great topic for me. So I'm going to have a lot of questions if the audience doesn't.
Well, I would be willing to bet that the questions that you have are the same questions a lot of other people have. So please, by all means, ask away. Ask away.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here and talk with your folks, and just happy to be here.
Okay, so
virtual or otherwise.
Started, and you can. Rachel's got a nice little intro video that gives you a little background on her, and then she can take over the screen, and we'll start our presentation.
Awesome, thank you. All right, hi everybody, and I'm thrilled to be here and talk to you about this. This is kind of can be an overwhelming task, right? Getting all of those photos, whether they're printed photos or they're digital photos. And it can be a big task. But what I'm gonna say is just sit back, relax, take a little listen, and maybe by the end of this, you'll feel a little bit more prepared to take it on. So we're going to get started here. So I have a quick little video to show you. I'm not sure if you've all been here before. If so, I'm sorry that you're gonna have to watch this again. But this was my 5 minutes of fame, where I got to do a presentation here in Howard County about something that I'm passionate about, which is obviously photos and the stories that are connected to those. So this quick video will give you a little bit of an idea about who I am and what I'm about.
longest 5 minutes of my life or yours. My challenge to you today is to go home and find your most important photos and discover what the stories are behind them. Some of those photos are going to trigger.
Oops. Sorry about that.
Hello, everyone. Here's to hoping this isn't the longest 5 minutes of my life or yours. My challenge to you today is to go home and find your most important photos and discover what the stories are behind them. Some of those photos are going to trigger individual memories, like my memory of our hunting camp where there was more snoring than hunting, salamanders under stumps, and whippoorwills singing, if you know what that is. Some photos are actually going to tell a story. This is the story of my Aunt Barbara and my dad, and they were running away from home. And my grandmother was nice enough to pack their lunch in their lunch bag. And because of this physical picture, this story has lived on for 80 plus years. Some photos are actually going to serve as a reminder of how you're loved. My children are not old enough to remember these individual memories, but they will know by seeing these pictures that they were loved by their pappy. Some photos are going to give you a glimpse into someone else's world. This was my dad's world. He was a carpenter, and he did what he loved, and he loved what he did for a lifetime, and that's a legacy that we could all learn something from. And although this building is now empty, it's filled with many memories. Memories of me helping my dad. I can still go into this building today and smell the wood chips, and it brings back many fond memories. And it also is the place where the ghosts of my great uncle and my dad both worked. This is my great uncle. And when I found this photo in a drawer as we were getting ready for the auction, I had a little regret that I didn't have any pictures of my father doing what he loved to do. So I encourage you to go home and take photos of people doing what they love to do. As you're looking through some of your photos and sifting through the mounds, you're going to find gold. And the gold here is not them digging for gold, but the gold is my dad up in the very top that you can see. This was one of the last pictures that I had of him. My mom would hate that picture. This is my grandmother who turned 100 on December 12th, 2012. So think about that for a moment. And those are my kids. And I took pictures with me like these and questioned her and asked her some stories. And my children were present for that, which was an important part of the process, because I think that it's interesting to have them know what their family stories are as well. Some stories are going to go undiscovered. You're not going to know what is behind the photo. This was a road that my grandparents told us never to play on or near. Yet here they are on the road having their pictures taken. This was called Brownstone Hill, if that means anything. So I inspire you to involve the younger generation in those family story discoveries. It's going to be really important for them at some point. This was her at 101. Looking at my kids thinking, who are they? This woman is my chance to get it right. This is my mom. She's been diagnosed with dementia, and we have quite a journey in front of us, I'm sure. And it's going to be important for me to really document those stories and get pictures of her and know what her life was like. Pictures like these are going to trigger discovery sessions with her. And I can learn more about the experiences and the relationships that she had with family members. It's also going to become important for me to start making sure that I'm documenting the new memories. This is her 80th birthday, and it was one of the nicest days we've ever had. And on occasion, I am going to have to embrace the selfie, which I am not a big fan of. But it's going to be important for both of us to have pictures like this that I can use with her and for me. There may come a day that she won't know who I am. And I also have to recognize that it doesn't have to be a technically good picture to be a good picture. In all its blur, you know they're having a great time, and there is a lot of love right there. And remember that the photos are not about the physical piece of paper, but it's about the people in them and the relationships and the love that goes on between them. And I also have to know to hand the camera to someone else, and you should all do the same. I know how I felt as I was digging through my own photos, looking for photos of my dad and my mom, and I knew how important it was. When I found those photos, it's going to be important for my kids as well to find photos of me someday. So I encourage you to go home and find your important photos and discover the stories behind them. Go home and take pictures with your family, and go home and just be present with your family.
Oop, I want to see that again. So I know it was my own presentation, but sometimes that one gets to me every time. Every time I watch it, it reiterates to me how important these photos are and capturing the stories and making those new memories. My last visit home to my mom, she did not know who I was. So seeing those pictures was got me in the heart. All right, so let's get started. You know you're in the right place today if you have digital photos everywhere. As Suzanne mentioned, they can be on hard drives and thumb drives and CDs, and we also talked about floppy disks, if you remember those. If you dropped your phone in the toilet or some other watery place, would you be heartbroken? If the answer is yes, then you probably need to figure out a plan. Knowing where to get started. If you don't know where to get started, you're in a good spot here today. If you've started and stopped this process multiple times, or if you feel like the only way to manage the storage on your phone is to get a new phone with more storage, then you're in the right place. I know a lot of people that have done that. They're like, I have so many pictures on my phone is not working anymore. What do I do? So together, our time together today is going to be I've got to set some realistic expectations for you in what this next hour holds. We're going to talk about some simple steps and things that you can do to get started, just kind of gaining some control over your photos. And then we can talk about other ways that Scrap My Pics may be able to help you out. The most beautiful things in life are not things. They're people, places, memories, and pictures. They're feelings and moments and smiles and laughter. So through your process of organizing your photos, whether it's your printed photos or your digital photos, you are going to get to encounter those good memories and those feelings again. And sometimes they're hard memories, but that's why we are stopping that moment in time with our cameras, because we want to remember. So let's set some realistic expectations. This process of doing a webinar on digital photo organizing always gives me a little bit of a pause, because it's not an easy task. There's a couple of things that you need to be realistic about. What's your technology comfort scale? On a scale of 1 to 10, are you a 1 or are you a 10? Are you a 1 and you want to run away because every time your phone, fills up with your photos, you're not sure what to do, or you're not even sure how to get your photos off of your phone? Or are you a 10? You're like, I can crack this nut and I'm going to get organized. So understanding your own personal comfort with technology is going to be an important piece in deciding how you're going to attack this process. There's just lots of variables involved. Different types of phones. You may have multiple types of phones in your own home, and learning how to manage those and get all of your photos into a centralized location could be a challenge. So knowing how to manage those different variables is going to become important. And then understanding how long this whole process is going to take. It could take months just to get everything under control. But then there's also the ongoing maintenance, which is a very important part of this process. So not just getting them organized, but keeping them organized, and setting up the new habits is going to be an important step in keeping this process rolling along. So we're going to talk today about 5 steps that can kind of get you jump started into getting your collection under control. The first one is planning and prepping, right? And we're not talking about, prepping for apocalyptic event. We're just talking about prepping for getting started with organizing your photos. Choosing your hardware and software. This is going to be an important step that a lot of people don't really think about. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Copying your photos to an external hard drive and removing some duplicates. We're going to talk about a little bit about that process. And then there's the maintenance and the education piece. And last but not least is backing it up, which is an important part of if that phone falls into the toilet, what are you going to do? So planning and prepping. So I would dedicate a notebook, because as you work through this process, and I do this with my own client projects that we work with, is I keep a notebook for each client. And because some of the stuff will start to seem redundant, and you're going to be like, did I do this already? Did I do this step already? Did I already transfer the information from that thumb drive? So you want to keep a notebook, date it, keep specific details. And that way, the next time you open up your notebook, if it's in a week or a month, you'll know exactly where you left off. Next step is making a list of all of the devices and media that you may have that contain your photos. Don't be worried right now about whether there's duplicates. There are going to be duplicates. We're all guilty, and I shouldn't use the word guilty, but we've all made backups of our backups. If you have a time machine running in the background on your computer, or you have some other backup running on your computer, the initial goal right now is getting all of your photos to one place so that you can then go through and screen out and filter out the duplicates and redundant photos. So right now, I just want you to make a list of all the possible devices and types of media that may possibly contain your photos.
I have a question already.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, about the devices. What if they're devices that you haven't used in like it's an old phone, it's an old laptop that you can't even charge anymore? What do we do with those?
So when I get those, I will sometimes, it really just kind of depends on the device, right? If you can't charge it anymore, you may end up having to send it out to a service to see if they can, on a laptop, remove the existing hard drive. They might be able to grab the images and the content that's on that hard drive. If it's a matter of it won't charge anymore, I think the answer there is probably still, maybe you send the device out and see if they can extract the information from the hard drive, because they can take that hard drive out of the device and plug it in. They have, I don't have any on my desk right now, but I actually have a device that I can take in what was an internal hard drive and plug it in and read off of it.
Yeah. I think it's good for people, I guess, to just understand that there are professional resources to help you get those things out of where you think they're stuck forever.
Yeah. And phones can be kind of tricky. Hopefully your old phones, hopefully the information from your old phones was transferred to the new phone. And sometimes you may just need to say, it's not, you might just have to let it go, which is not always an easy answer. But there are professional companies out there that can sometimes get information off of those old hard drives from laptops. Yeah. And like here, we have devices here that can read CDs and DVDs. Even if you don't have one at home, we have different devices here that we can use sometimes to plug things in and get information off of them.
Great.
Did that answer your question?
It sure does. Because I have a few things that I haven't opened them in a while. So
your kids will look at it and be like, what is that?
Yeah. It's like a flip phone.
Yeah, those can be tough. And honestly, if it's a flip phone, the photos that are on those flip phones are not very good quality.
Yeah.
So they might be worth just letting it go.
Yep, I'm good with that. It's okay.
Yeah. Something else to consider during your planning process is, are you going to be sharing your collection with other members of your family or friends? And the only reason I bring that up is in thinking about what kind of software you're going to use, or what other type of sharing capabilities. You need to be thinking about the sharing capabilities of whatever software you're choosing to use. And then list out your long-term photo projects. Have you always wanted to do your kids' baby books, or have you always wanted to do a family history book? Having those goals listed out gives you something to plan towards. So, and along the way, you may find some photos that are really relevant to those projects that you can then earmark, basically, or rate and say, I know this is a photo, I've been looking for this, I want to use it in a family history book. You know, earmarking those photos and noting where they are will go a long way once you get back to the fun projects beyond the organizing. And are you going to be adding digitized photos to this collection? If so, you need to be thinking about storage and the long-term storage and the amount of storage that you're going to need on whatever device you choose to use as your central photo hub. And then the next thing is, scheduling blocks of time to do this. Block it out on your calendar, whether it's an hour a week or 15 minutes a day or whatever it is. If you don't block the time, it's just not going to happen. So I would highly recommend marking some time on your calendar to work on this kind of project, because it's going to take some time. Oops. So the next thing in this process is choosing your hardware and software. So I'm not advocating Apple here. It's just happened to be a stock photo that I have. I know many people use Windows machines, and those are perfectly fine. Apples are perfectly fine. But what you really need to consider is your storage. So depending on the volume of photos that you have, laptops are not necessarily the ideal piece of hardware for your photo collection. If you're trying to come up with a centralized photo hub to contain and manage all of your photos, which could end up being, depending on how many photos you take in a year, right? If you take 4,000 photos a year across a period of 10 years, you've got at least 40,000 photos there, right? So that takes some storage. And the newer the phone and the newer the cameras, the larger amount of space that those photos are taking up, because those cameras are getting better and they are larger number of megapixels. So this is a pretty important decision that you need to make is where are you going to put that hub? And I would suggest that it not be a computer that's over 5 years old, right? Because you don't want to do all this work, maybe even 3. I know I'm pushing it there, but you don't want to do all of this work and then have your computer die, right? Now, hopefully by the end of this, you'll know how important backups are, and you'll have a backup somewhere that you would be able to, mirror that back onto a new computer. But when you are working through a large number of photos and trying to organize them, having a computer with a good processor, right, and good memory, so hard drive and memory are 2 different things. Having a computer with a good processor and storage is going to be important. So having that RAM, and having RAM as your memory, right? That's what makes things, that's what's going to make things work smoothly. And then having the disk space to actually store all of those photos is pretty important. And this is something that a lot of clients that come to me that want us to do the organizing for them, my first question is, how old's your computer, and where is it going to go when I'm done with it? Because they could spend thousands of dollars with us to do all of this and then have no place to put that organized set of photos. And if it sits on a hard drive on their desk now for 2 years till they get a new computer, then they now have 2 additional years of photos that they need to get on there. So they will have lost some value there.
The external hard drives also are not that expensive anymore. And they hold a lot. They have, tremendous ability for storage. So I think
and external hard drives can work well. If what you have is a laptop, then your solution is probably going to be external hard drives, because most laptops these days, they're not coming with a whole lot of storage, because they're assuming that most people are storing their things in the cloud, and that, you know, they don't really need much local storage. So having external hard drives can work with a laptop scenario, but you have to be extra conscientious about backing up that external hard drive, because they are also much more susceptible to being dropped, along with the laptop, right? That's the other thing, is a stationary desktop machine that sits on your desk is less likely to be dropped somewhere, right, than a laptop that's being carried around with you. You put it in your bag, you move it around. And the same with the external hard drive. So if you're going to do an external drive, you know, set up, leave that external hard drive someplace where it's going to be stable. I wouldn't recommend taking it with you when you go somewhere. If you do, make sure that you have a current backup. And there are some hard drives out there, you know, you just have to read the details, but some of the hard drives are meant to take the hard knocks, right? And a solid state drive, if you've seen SSD listed anywhere when you're purchasing hard drives, those will, they're more expensive, but they will stand up to the hard knocks better than a hard drive that has moving parts inside it. So a solid state drive does not have any moving parts inside. So that is something to consider when you're looking at the external hard drive. So along with making those decisions on your hardware, you're also going to want to purchase 2 brand new hard drives. Don't use the one that's in your closet that has a couple of things on it that, well, I'm not sure how old it is. I'll use that one. Just do yourself a favor and purchase 2 new hard drives so that you know they're fresh out of the box and that you've got as long of a life on it as you can, because the external hard drives, they will die. It's just a matter of time. So it's something that you have to be cognitive of and managing. And then the third thing about, you know, choosing your photo hub is determining what software system that you want to use to actually manage your photos. So once they're organized, how are you going to manage them? Are they going to be in a file structure on your computer? Or are you going to use Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Bridge or the Photos app on that, you know, that the Apple computers come with? Any one of those are fine. You just have to commit to it, learn to use it, and be consistent. So I have my preferences, but it's because I've been using it for probably 15 years. So the third step in all of this is getting everything consolidated. Again, we're not worrying about the duplicates just yet. We're hunting and gathering all of your photo devices and the media. You've got, I'm going to just skip here to this next image. These are all the different possible medias that you may come across. And I'm not limited to this either. I'm sure there's others. The different cell phones in your household, the digital cameras in your household, CDs, DVDs. Sometimes when we had our film developed back in the day, they would give you a CD with the digital images on it. They were converting things right away. So having those CDs, that's great. I mean, that can save you some time and some money. You could have thumb drives, also known as, you know, flash drives, external hard drives that you have backups on, SD cards from the cameras. Those are that top center picture. And then you also have your cloud services. So you may have photos in iCloud. You may have photos in Google Drive or Amazon. You could have photos in many of these different places. So the first thing you're going to do here is, you know, go back to that list in the planning step and know where everything is. Write down your passwords for those cloud accounts. Have that all in your notebook, because then every time you go to do this, you're going to have a centralized location in your notebook where you can find this information. And then I want you to label those devices. You know, take a piece of masking tape and a Sharpie and say hard drive number 1, hard drive number 2. thumb drive number 1, thumb drive number 2. This is going to help you in the consolidation. And it's also going to help you, you can actually write on that masking tape, transferred to external hard drive number 1 on such and such a date. This is just so you can kind of keep track of everything that you've got going on. You can put all your things that are done, you can put them in a Ziploc bag and label the Ziploc bag done, just so you don't end up going back and forth thinking, I don't know, did I get everything off of this hard drive or not? Labeling is a huge part of what we do here. It seems like such a simple, mundane task, but it really does help us keep track of what we've got going on. And then your 2 new hard drives, you're going to label it, you know, hard drive number 1, hard drive number 2. One is going to be kind of your working drive. And then the second one, you're going to use as your initial backup of this whole big, giant, consolidated mess. Oops, wrong way. So once you have everything labeled and ready to go, and you've located all of your different media, then you're going to start copying all of those folders of photos onto hard drive number 1. And I usually tell people, don't worry about the duplicates at this point, because you're going to have some software. I'm going to recommend that you use some software to actually find those duplicates. So once you get everything consolidated, just copy everything over, right? Not necessarily, you don't want to move it, just copy it. So get everything copied from all of your different devices and all of your different media onto hard drive number 1. And then you're going to make a backup copy of that with your second hard drive, and then just set that one aside, right? So in case something happens, say you run the duplicate finder on it and something blows up and you don't like the way it turned out, you now know that you at least have this, all of that initial consolidation work that you did, you have that on backup number 2, right? So you're going to have lots of back and forth kind of backing up here. Because what you don't want to do is lose any of the hard work that you've done. So there's going to be some stages throughout the process where you're like, okay, now that all the deduping's done, now I'm going to make a backup of that. And you can put that on your hard drive. So that being said, depending on how large you think your collection might be, you might get a 2 to 4 terabyte hard drive. I know that sounds huge, but it could save you time in the long run by purchasing that larger hard drive. So then once you get everything consolidated, you're going to run a duplicate finder software on that hard drive. There's a couple of different ones. There's one that I really like for Mac, and it's called Photo Sweeper. And I have another one here listed at the end that we recommend for Windows, that I know some people that really like this Windows version.
So how do those work, Rachel? Does it scan the image itself to see that there's a duplicate of it? It's, you know, if I'm going to tell you that I name my photos sometimes so I can find them because I, you know, birthday or whatever, vacation. And so I'm assuming these things scan the image to find the duplicate.
It can do both. So these softwares can be pretty smart, and you can say, depending on the settings that you choose, like there's little sliders on there, and you can say, find me all of the images that look exactly the same. You can also say, find me all of the images that have the same exact file name. So knowing what your history is, that you've renamed files, then you're going to search for photos based on exact, you know, what it looks like. It'll look at stuff like the histogram and bitmaps and things like that. It's going to look at those technical details to determine whether or not it's an exact duplicate. Now, what that's also going to do is, it's also, if you're saying, show me an exact duplicate, that's all it's going to show you, right? It's going to show you an exact duplicate that's the same size, it's the same, it looks the same. And also the same file name if you're saying exact. But like on Photo Sweeper, I can say, show me an exact duplicate with a different file name. And I can move these sliders across the screen, and it'll show me different variations, right? And that's what, once you get to this stage, sometimes what I will do is I will run the duplicate finder on a couple of folders first, where I know there are duplicates, and I will find the right settings that find those duplicates based on the criteria. So if I know that I've changed the file names, I'm going to set up, some criteria, and I'm going to write those in my notebook, right? And then that way I know exactly the next time what settings to use in order to find the duplicates in that particular collection. And I will run a variety of those scans on the same photos, because it's not perfect. It's just not. None of them.
I don't have to open every single photo, I will be happy.
Yeah. And usually what it'll do is it'll go through, most of them all operate pretty similarly, where once you decide what criteria you want to search on, it goes through, and it could take an hour. I have a client that I was working on the other day, and I did an initial set on hers, and it was 180,000 photos.
Wow.
And I'm not done yet. I'm not pulling in photos. I'm not done consolidating yet, but I thought I wanted to try and get kind of an initial group out of there, just because it becomes so unwieldy. But she's a professional photographer, so that plays into it. But this was her personal collection, not even including her professional collection. But it took about an hour on Photo Sweeper to look at all of those photos. And I don't necessarily recommend that you do like one big large chunk. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just go in and grab 10 folders and run it on that. And then I'll take that 10 folder, that now consolidated 10 folders, and add in 5 more folders.
Yeah.
Right. And kind of just like keep kind of layering onto that. Because depending on your computer, you just might not be able to run a really large group like that, which is also why we come back to the hardware, on the actual computer itself, is having something with some good memory or a good processor, a current processor is going to allow you to run through these parts of the process a little bit better. But once it runs through the duplicate finder, it marks them. And then you can say, yep, this looks right. Go ahead and trash those. And so it'll put them in your recycle bin, and you can move on to your next set. So it takes a little bit of it takes a little bit of experimentation to find the settings that are right for your collection. And know that it's not perfect, but yeah, you don't have to go in, and it really removes the labor intensive part of side-by-side comparisons. And you can even tell it how to prioritize. So if you know that there's a certain folder where you have everything really well organized and you want to keep that organization in place, you can tell the computer that I want this folder to be a priority. So if it finds duplicates, don't mark these as duplicates, mark the ones over here as duplicates. So you can kind of, add those criteria in as well. So it can get a little complex, but hey, if it cuts your collection down by 50% right off the bat by finding exact duplicates, yep, that's a huge step, right? And just keeping notes of progress in your notebook. Literally, I will write down, found 2,000 duplicates using these settings, because I want to know that the next time I sit down that I use those same settings. And I know what folders I left off with, because again, I'm not normally running one giant duplicate finder. I'm usually doing the layers. It just helps me mentally keep track of things a little bit better. And sometimes I don't have time for it to just sit and run for an hour. Or 2. Any other questions on that? Or are there any questions showing up in the chat?
I don't see any yet. Anybody have any questions? We're going to keep moving along here.
All right. We already talked about these. These are your different devices. This is kind of an interesting, fun statistic, but this company called Rise Above Research, digital photography projections. Now, keep in mind what kind of year we had in 2020, and people weren't really out and about as much, but we still took 1.1 trillion digital photos.
That's amazing. That's just, I don't even... I mean, I think about, the folks that are taking, you see them taking, they're just pressing and it's making like 8 copies.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Bad habits.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll talk about those a little bit. But this is crazy. I mean, you think, and they're expecting a 25% increase this year, probably mostly because we're now out and
Yes.
people are taking vacations again and traveling a little bit again. So it's huge, and we're each just a small percentage of that, but we each have how many digital camera devices in our household? I know in our house, we've got 4, 5, probably at least 6 devices that take pictures.
Yeah.
So now my teenage kids don't take many photos, so which is a whole different,
Well, that's 'cause
a whole
they're
different
boys.
interesting fact.
If they were girls, they would be taking
True.
lots of pictures.
That's true. That's true. That is a very good point.
I have, so I know that I'm what I'm speaking about there.
Yeah. So from an organizing strategy standpoint, this is just kind of a small snippet of what my structure looks like on my computer. I create annual folders, and then within those annual folders, I create monthly folders. And then within those monthly folders, I will have events. And depending on the software that you're using, those photos can kind of be grouped together, because every time we take a photo with a digital device, it's date stamping it. So our cell phones, your date stamp's going to be pretty accurate. With our digital cameras, you want to go in and just make sure that your digital camera is set to the current date, because then that way, when it comes time to organize, it's going to make things group together so much easier. So I will use my software, and it kind of groups those photos together that I took, on a particular day or a particular month. And like, if you look at that 2012-08, that was a trip we took to Maine those first couple of days, but sometimes I'll throw that all in one folder that says 2012-08-Maine, and I'll throw all the photos in there. But if I know I'm going to be creating a photo book, I like to kind of break it down by day, because I tell myself, okay, I'm going to pick my 15 favorite pictures from that day, and having them in smaller groups helps me compartmentalize that process. So that's where, knowing what kind of projects you want to work on is going to be helpful. So creating those subfolders, this is just an example of naming best practice. So having those dates in there is going to help you if you're working on an annual album, right? Having those folders in there by date with year, month, and day is going to arrange things chronologically in your computer, which will also help you arrange things chronologically for your projects. And then I always talk to people about creating a rating system. So while you're organizing your photos, come up with some kind of a rating system that works for you. So for me, I use Lightroom, and there is a star rating system in there, and it goes 1 through 5 stars. So when I pull photos in from either my phone or my camera, I'm going to rate those photos. I might not always do it right in that moment, but at some point in time, I come back to that set of photos and I will rate them. And in my head, I have my 2 and 3 stars. 2, 3, and 4 stars are probably what I use the most. So my 3-star photos are, yep, I want this photo. I want to put it in a photo book. My 4-star photos are the photos that I might want to put on the wall. My 2-star photos are, I want to keep it for a little while. I'm not really sure, like maybe it's kind of redundant to something that's in my 3-star folder, but I'm not ready to delete it just yet. A 1-star could be, I'm going to delete it, but I have another method for all the ones that I'm going to delete. But eventually I will come back and look at those 2 stars again and likely delete them.
Yeah.
So, and then my 5 stars are my Pulitzers. I don't really have any of those.
Well, Pulitzers in your heart.
That's right. The Pulitzers of my heart. That's right. So that's kind of the rating system that I used for me personally. You have to come up with what works for you. How is your brain wired, and what makes the most sense for you? Some of the softwares out there might be color. Apple Photos has, I think, a little heart or something. So it's just marked as a favorite. So you don't have quite as many options on that. But at a minimum, having your favorites is a huge way to start. Yes. Because in Apple, in the Photos software, you can say, show me all my favorites from August of 2012. And if all of those come up, wouldn't that be amazing? You could do a slideshow or a photo album pretty easily just by seeing those photos. So those are just some simple organizing strategies once you get through that deduping process. And then fourth here is, back it up. Knowing the difference between, a backup application and online storage. They're not all created equal. Sometimes there's a gray area in there where they kind of act as both, but a Mosey or a Crash Plan or a software like that or an app like that, that is a backup, right? You're not necessarily storing your photos there for easy access. That's really just, it's in case your hard drive fails, that's a place for you to go and recoup your images and even your documents. Like you can have your documents stored there as well. Online storage could be Google Photos, or I haven't looked at Amazon closely, but Google Photos can kind of act as a backup, but also as an online storage. And some of those are free, or you get a certain amount for free, or if you choose the free version, it's going to compress your photos. So it's one of the things I always say here is that free is not always free. It usually comes with some sort of a cost attached to it. So just know what that is.
So if you've put your photos in one of these, cloud storage places and they get compressed, what does that mean to the quality of the image later on?
It can degrade the quality of it if you ever wanted to reprint it. Like if you wanted to take that photo and enlarge it and make it into a big giant piece of removable wallpaper, if that photo is compressed permanently and you don't have access to that photo, the original photo somewhere else, then you just might not be able to enlarge that photo as big as you'd like to. And for some people, that might not be a big deal. Yeah. You just have to know how you want to use your photos. Like I always want my original uncompressed photo because I might want to make a large reprint on my wall.
Well, this is just something that I've observed recently, it seems to be a generational trend where the younger you are, and I'm speaking about my children, and they each have their own homes now. They are not into hanging photos on the wall. They are hanging artwork or sculptural things. They're not hanging mom's picture or a picture of them with their friends. And so I think, certainly my generation and my parents and my grandparents, you would go in the house and the wall was covered, a wall of photos of the whole family. And I just don't see that anymore. So I think the digital storage now is, that's what people are depending on.
Yep.
They're not showcasing like people used to in their homes.
They aren't.
Why? But that's just what I'm observing when I go in, and my kids' friends, it's the same thing. I just don't see that personal.
Yep. And I think some of that is, are they at an age where they're renting a home? And so they can't hang things on the wall. Or they don't have kids yet. Once they have kids, that changes things, right?
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
You're going to start putting pictures of your kids on the wall. Or if you have somebody that's a little bit more into the creative arts, and they're taking landscape photos that they want to, if they're photographers, a professional photographer, you're going to want your uncompressed original photo somewhere, not out in the cloud. And that's not necessarily the audience that we're talking to today, but I think it's the planning for the future. And, storage is pretty cheap. So I would generally opt for paying for storage so that I can at least have my uncompressed original there versus the free, because you want to have it as future-proof as possible so that, you can do something with those photos in the future if you wanted to. And some of the free out there, you really have to look at the fine print. And I haven't looked at the fine print recently, but I do know that in some cases, you're actually handing over some of your rights to companies to be able to use your photos for things that you would maybe never even know about that they've used, right? So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just important to read the fine print of them. And once you start paying for storage, then our expectation of how they store them privately is different. So
Yeah.
you do relinquish some privacy rights if you're choosing the free. And you also have to think about some of the companies, well, what if they go out of business? Now, the chances of the Google or the Amazon going out of business are probably, pretty slim. But you have other companies out there that maybe haven't been around as long, and they might be offering you storage, but again, it might not be uncompressed, and you certainly wouldn't want that to be your only place to have that, which brings us to this 3-2-1 backup strategy. So having 3 copies of your collection somewhere, it seems kind of crazy, but having 3 copies of your collection somewhere in 2 different types of storage, right? So maybe one is, your hard drive, and the other one is, a cloud storage somewhere, or cloud backup software. And then you want to have at least one that's offsite somewhere. Maybe it's at a family member's house or in a fire safe proof or safety deposit, but then you have to manage that. So if you don't want to be running to your safety deposit box every 2 months or however frequently you go, then having that offsite cloud storage might be sufficient there. And some of the cloud storage is a set it and forget it. So like a Mozy or a Crash Plan or a Backblaze, some of those companies, you set it, and as long as your computer is plugged in and on the internet, it has that backup is happening on a continuous basis without you really having to do anything except for check it occasionally and make sure that it's actually running. So that's where, just understanding what your style is and how active of a participant you want to be in that backup strategy. And hard drives, the average lifespan on an external hard drive is 3 to 5 years. So on that, masking tape on your hard drive, it's probably a good idea to write down the date of which you purchased that, so that you kind of start to get a sense of, when it might be time to replace that hard drive and copy everything onto a new one. They do not last indefinitely. So
Good stuff.
Yeah. And then maintenance and education, the part that is probably the hardest, right? Maintaining it. Once you've gotten it all organized, then you got to maintain it, or you're going to have lost all that precious work. So set aside time, once a month to work on your photos, and maybe you even treat your cell phone like a camera, right? So you take the photos, you get them off of your cell phone, and you move them into your photo hub, and it's backing up somewhere, and that stuff's happening automatically. Deleting those duplicate and redundant photos on a regular basis. So when you do upload your camera photos, then take a look right then and say, okay, which ones are duplicates? And that's where it comes back to, especially on the cell phones, knowing your settings on those cell phones. And when you hold down that little shutter button, how many photos is it taking? Yeah. Right? Or do you have the live view setting turned on your iPhone? Because if you do, it's taking these little tiny videos that are taking up space. And turn that off unless you have a specific reason to use it, would be my advice on those. So taking a class on the iPhone can go a long way in helping you manage your long-term collection and not taking too many photos, and going through and deleting the sunsets and the food pictures and the screenshots and the kids' nostril phone number pictures that they took with your phone. I know I have my own accidental foot collection of photos, right, where I'm walking along and I have my hand on my phone and I'm taking a picture of my foot. So getting rid of those on a regular basis will also help you, manage it. So taking a class, take fewer, better photos. I have here notice a theme. So it's about the education, learning how to use your phone or your camera. changing some of those habits and really understanding it so that as time goes on, it's just not this exponentially large, growing, massive living creature. So, and then read, define, print, and educate yourself. We've kind of talked about that a little bit on the cloud services. And one of the tips that I'll give you, and I believe that it's the same way with the Android to Google as it is to Apple and iCloud. And I always assume people know this, but I think it's a bad assumption on my part, is that if you delete a phone, if you're counting on iCloud to be your backup for your phone, say you're like, okay, I've got to clean off some space on my phone. If you delete a photo from your phone, you are deleting it from your iCloud account, and vice versa.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yep. So it's kind of a big deal. And a lot of people don't know that. And I have a feeling that Google and the Android kind of work the same way. If you have Google Photos, you just have to make sure that you understand what those settings are, so that you might be thinking, hey, I'm clearing off some space on my phone. I want to keep this photo, but just not on my phone.
Yeah.
Then, you could be deleting that phone forever, or that photo forever. So just understanding those settings is kind of a big deal.
Perfect. That's a good thing to know.
Yeah. And these are just some resources, some things that we covered throughout this process. There's, hard drives. I would stick with the names that you recognize. There's Seagate, CWD, which is also Western Digital, SanDisk. I think Sony makes some, but I would stick with, the brand names that they're going to stand by those hard drives a little bit better than the off names. The deduplication software, the one for Mac that I really like is Photo Sweeper, and for Windows is Duplicate Cleaner Pro is an option. And again, there are some of those that are free versions, but they're not going to do as much. They're not going to be quite as robust. The Photo Managers is an association of people that do what I do, but they also have a Facebook page that you can get on for the average Joe that just wants to get out there and organize their photos. And I should have put that on here, actually. I can add that and send it to you, Suzanne. But they have a Facebook page where people get on and they ask all kinds of questions, and the Photo Manager folks step in and will answer some of your questions. Now, you may get 10 different answers, but they're all often you'll see a common thread through all of the answers. You really have to just kind of to parse that out and figure out what works for you. And then I have a friend that does what I do out in Minnesota, and she just has released a couple of courses on organizing your photos. So if you are more of the DIY kind of person and you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, she's got some courses that you could certainly purchase from her and do. And then there are many, many, many different types of software out there for organizing, but these are a couple that I like and trust. So there's Adobe, there's Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom. There's a couple of different versions of that. There's Apple Photos, there's Adobe Bridge. Lightroom and Adobe Bridge work across both Windows and Apple computers. Okay. So that's kind of a good option. And Adobe Bridge is free. And that is a free app that I would recommend and I would trust because it's Adobe. They've been around a really long time.
Well, we love free.
Yeah, so Bridge would do a really nice job of helping you organize your photos and keeping that, that annual structure in place where it's actually using, your hard drive to store the photos. It's just helping you see it in a different way. And then the cloud storage and backup services, there's a couple listed here that we use. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is with OneDrive, if you have purchased Office 365, I think you get a terabyte of free storage with OneDrive.
Yep.
And that can be kind of a slick way to set up some syncing and stuff there with your photos. So, and other documents.
Great. Good stuff. And this is, of course, you know, how Rachel can help you with her services.
Yep. And, you know, from a digital organizing standpoint, I'll tell you, if you got through all the steps of just getting everything consolidated, if you got everything onto an external hard drive, you could hand that off to us and we could do the deduping piece of it and get things set up into some organizational structure. We could hand that back to you and then you could do the fine tuning. You know, that's the part that you would want to learn and do anyways, because you're maintaining it. But
Yes.
getting through that initial just consolidation, we have the equipment to do it. We have the software to do it. And it's something that hopefully you would only ever have to do one time. So sometimes having to do something where you only have to do it once, it's not good use of your time. But the ongoing and really then the fine tuning of the organization, that we hand that back to you, and it could be good in establishing some new habits, right? So that's kind of where I encourage people to go with those kind of steps, is get everything consolidated, get it all onto an external hard drive. And if you don't want to do that part, you can just hand us all your media and we'll do it. And we'll still hand you back something.
This is another part of the whole decluttering your home. This is part of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something you touch every day, but it's there and it needs organizing and it needs, you know, decluttering, and it needs to have, you know, you want to keep it. I mean, you don't want these things to be lost, or, you know, it's such an important part of your family's history, just like the prints have been for years. So I'm glad to say that I am more organized than I thought I was. I do keep folders by year, and within those folders, I usually categorize by event, and you know, but it's been much easier for me to find something quickly by doing it that way.
Yeah, sounds like you're on the right track.
So I just have to commit to more time of doing this, you know, and keeping on top of it, which is what we all have to do. Well, this has been great information, Rachel. And I thank you again for spending an hour with us, and appreciate your time. And certainly I'm glad that we found you months ago, and you brought a lot of great information to us. And because we do work with people who are usually in the process of decluttering, downsizing, and getting ready to move, I think that everything that you've shared today and at the last webinar is so helpful to people, and hopefully they'll be reaching out to you. And if you do reach out to Rachel, please let her know that you saw her at Augsburg or heard about her through Augsburg, because that would be great for us to know that, you know, people are keeping in touch with her. And we will be coming to you. I think our next event is August 19th. That's our next webinar. It is going to be with an elder law attorney. So you'll be getting an invite for that. You can follow us on Facebook and see all of our upcoming events on there, and also our website, thevillage@augsburg.org. There's an events page there, and we have all of our events on there all the time, so you can register for things there. So thank you again, Rachel, for spending time with us. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
To help people organize and make memories, keep their memories in order. And thank you again to the audience for joining us. And I hope you continue to have a very safe and healthy summer. And we will see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.